lérò pé omi ẹ̀kọ́ ni. Ọba alágbègbè kirikiri náà ni.
Àsọ̀rọ̀ yàrá ló pa baálẹ̀ bàrà. Tó ń dábàá ti jí láàárọ̀ láìsẹ̀ kùmà lámàṣẹ́ o. Wọ́n dẹ̀ jí náà wọ́n kó kùmà tí.
Lagos House of Assembly there holding legislative session in Yoruba language. Our focus this morning is on how best to save Nigeria's indigenous languages. That's our first big story. All right, let me say Ekaro, Otutuoma, and Inakwananku. That's covering Nigeria. Good morning and welcome to TVC Breakfast. Someone is lost here.
That was unfair of you to do that.
Yeah, but I can do that. It's
because
being
I was
Nigerian.
just going to say Otutuoma, Unabolachi, Ekaro, Shedada, Laji.
Okay.
Mukwana Lafia.
Inakwananku, and so on. And I took it away from you. Thanks for joining us on the Friday's edition of TVC Breakfast. I am Mike Okwache.
And we're so glad to have you join us this morning. I am Ngozi Alebu. Also coming up.
Right now, instead of all the excuses that this government is used to, which they should sit up and begin to do the needful and get these girls back.
Rescuing the remaining Chibok girls is still a major demand from the Bring Back Our Girls pressure group to the Nigerian government. They say the search for the girls continues.
The IDPs themselves need to have their humanity returned to them. Living in camps, living in situations where they're looking like prisoners, like captives, is not even in their own interest.
Yes, indeed, and the interest and plight of internally displaced persons continue to generate concerns from all quarters, and they cannot but ask for a better life and means of livelihood.
Now, TVC Breakfast discussions begin in a moment. Because I remember when we were growing up in primary school, there were things, when we met, we go to school and we meet our teachers, it is compulsory that you greet them in the language. But when you get to class, you are not allowed to speak vernacular. So that's the cross. And you have to contend with, but it helped to a great extent where we got to learn how to speak our own languages because the fathers and parents were teaching us that, and then going to school to learn a second language.
Indeed, you know, but Mike, it is more worrisome to hear that Nigeria, some 11 indigenous Nigerian languages are totally extinct.
Going extinct.
They're not going extinct, they're totally extinct. Right. And now the question is, how do you even give something you don't have? If parents cannot speak their own language, how are they going to speak with their children?
You know, we are Americans, we're Western people, and you know, when the concept of globalization and modernization, people take it too far. They mistake Westernization for civilization.
And I'm just wondering, what are the implications when you or I cannot speak our own language, our mother tongue?
But, you know, I'm happy I can speak my language.
Well, I am glad too.
I know you can too.
Yes, I do. I can actually speak my language and my mother's language. Yeah,
Hey.
Okay. Look, if you leave me, I'm just gonna keep, you know. Speaking.
No, I won't leave you.
Okay.
So let's have it. Well, let's start out with our first big story. Language is a unique identity to a particular group of people, not only in Nigeria, but the world at large.
It is a system of communication in speech and writing used by people of a particular country or area, making it the most important aspect of human existence.
Yeah, now many indigenous languages, according to United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, are already under threat, while many have gone extinct.
Indeed. And now some languages have even been classified as endangered. And only a few speakers of the languages are left without transferring it to the younger generation. Well, we're now being joined by Director General, Center for Black and African Arts and Civilization, Ferdinand Anikwe. Good morning, Ibolachi.
No. Thank you very much.
It's really good to have you this morning. Yeah. Thank you. Now, when we talk about language, a lot of people are very quick to identify with the other person based on language quicker than any other thing in the world. How important, what's the place of language in human existence?
Well, you don't need to overemphasize the essence of language, because without language, there will be no cultural transmission from one generation to the other. But we are saying that there are languages that have suffered neglect. And at PAC 4, what we call Pan-African Cultural Congress Bureau, I am the president. We were at Johannesburg, and we agreed that the African Union must ensure that the languages of indigenous Africans must come to use as a medium of communication during all her deliberations. Come, 2063. Only God knows who will be alive then. But what we're trying to say is that there are very tendencies, very interesting ideas, philosophies, and ideologies that are pregnant and hidden in these languages, as a result of which we insist that these languages you think are small must be brought to bear on the contemporary development of communication. Because there are many things that are hidden which, if are properly identified and dissected, the world will learn from them. The other time they went up the hill somewhere in Nigeria and called it Coma Country. There are things hidden in the process of communication that are not being brought to light. And we have always said that these languages can be made to be internationally of quite significance to all countries. Britain is one of the smallest countries on earth, but because of their structural programs, insistence in developing their language. Don't you see the FID? Don't you see British Council? I delivered a lecture in British Council in Ghana 2 years ago. You see them budgeting billions of pounds sterling yearly, and I will tell you they want to help us to improve
to project their language, and it's not
because they want this. I'm talking to you, and my brother. I'm using the same language. So they are structurally, continually, and they are steadfast in ensuring that their language is in use all over the world. Any other language can be so developed, and these languages are rich. These languages convey a lot of other meanings, very interesting, unique nomenclature, which the world can learn from. For instance, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, what do you call it? Ijo. And there are even some others you think are smaller. Those languages, if properly developed, can show the world and convey very interesting cultural transmission programs.
All right, let's bring it home to Nigeria in terms of language as a two-edged sword, sort of. Language can separate people, and language can also bring people together. But we'll look at all that particular dynamic when we come back. Let's just take this break. When we come back, we'll I'll get you to share your thoughts on that. Stay with us.
Right, if you're just joining us, you're watching TVC Breakfast. We're discussing African and Nigerian languages on this segment. We have the Director General, Center for Black and African Arts and Civilization, Ferdinand Anikwe, with us in the studio. We've been talking about this. Now, we have some information to roll out for you concerning languages, but Ngozi, you were asking a question before.
Yes, about a fundamental aspect of language. It's so amazing that this language, as important as it is a double-edged sword, if one could describe it that way. It separates people and brings people together. You want to speak to that, how we as people use language as a weapon of division or unity, as it were?
Well, it is not necessary to emphasize the divisive aspect of language differences, because even if we use one language, as we are using the English language, we're also divided. We can use the same English language to cause war, to cause problems. But the point is that what we gain by ensuring that these different languages are encouraged and developed is more than the issue of division. And as I said, these things include new ideas, new tendencies, new philosophies, and several nomenclature that can best help explain contemporary phenomena in terms of world communication skills. Language is so important, so central. Without it, it is the soul of culture, soul of human communication, without which we can all we will become animals. And so what I'm saying in essence is that these languages, no matter how small they are, we need to research into them, and you will be marveled at the level of sophisticated intellectual contribution from these languages. And there is no formation of concepts and language development is at the center of intellectual development. And if there is none, then there is no intellectual development. Therefore, I don't even want us to say how many people are speaking one language or the other. Because any language that is properly developed can become a universal language.
You talk about concept, which is a very interesting one, but I'd like you to actually expatiate on that. I know there's something called intuitive perception in language, where you can only express certain feelings or thoughts through your indigenous language. And when you've lost that, where does that leave you as a person, as a human being, as a society, as a matter of fact?
Exactly.
No, what we are saying is that in the language expression, in the process of interacting with people, a lot of things start coming up. In short, a lot of times, even those languages, as it were, the original formation of those languages change as time goes on. For instance, the interaction of groups will either purify or add to a given language. It is a continuous program. And it is in this process that new concepts, new ideologies, new nomenclatures emerge to express specificities in terms of scientific discoveries, in terms of social understanding, in terms of conveying messages in the society generally. Therefore, language, it is just necessary that we develop our languages, because these local languages contain a lot. They are rich, and we want to exploit their situation.
All right, we'll come back to this. Now, language is a very important aspect of human communication. It is the verbal expression of culture. Here, Ferdinand said that earlier on. Now, it allows us to express our inner thoughts and emotions, and is the most efficient form of interaction among people.
Nigeria's population and language diversity makes her the third country in with the highest number of indigenous languages in the world, coming after Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. That's quite interesting. Didn't know that. I'm sure many people didn't know that. Now, of the 6,500 indigenous languages in the world, Papua New Guinea has more than 800 languages. Indonesia more than 700, and Nigeria has more than 500 languages.
Yeah. Let's dwell a bit more on indigenous Nigerian languages. An indigenous language is native to a region. There are more than 250 ethnic groups in the country in Nigeria, with about 521 languages, but 10 of these languages have already gone extinct.
Now, the official language of Nigeria is, of course, English, and that is due to the influence of the British colonial masters. The 10 commonly spoken indigenous languages in Nigeria are Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo, Ijaw, Kanuri, Fufude, Ibibio, Efik, Urobo, and Edo.
That's in Benin, exactly.
Yes.
And many have expressed worry over the gradual loss of some local Nigerian languages due to neglect. Now, in many cases, parents and their children abandon their native languages for English because it is a universally accepted language of communication.
Now, sometimes people assume the predominant language of their surroundings. Research by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, shows that 25% of children below the age of 11 are not able to speak their parents' indigenous language in Nigeria. Okay, you want to speak to that one? 25%?
Yeah, 25% of families of Nigerian children can't speak their indigenous languages. Now, what is responsible for this?
Well, it is a fundamental deviation from the normal educational process. One of the foremost professors of education here in Nigeria, late Professor Bar Shafoma, said that in the process of learning, you must start teaching the child from his or her mother's tongue as early as possible. And it is the proper learning process which enables that child to now acquire other languages. We have been in a mad rush to learn English language, French, and some other languages. And I want you to know that unless and until we come to terms with our own environment, starting from our own language, all these efforts will come to nullity. Because at the end of the day, you have not learned English, have you learned French?
You're just
Now,
in the middle somewhere.
Yes, you are in between. So we are thinking that the best is for you to come home and learn these original languages. I can tell you, some of us that were rigorously schooled in the norms and doctrines of our cultural behavior, of our language as it were, are better than our contemporaries anywhere, any day, even in the use of any other acquired language. And we are all insisting that these languages must be given priority in terms of the procedure in teaching them. You mentioned some Nigerian languages. You didn't mention Igala. And a study has shown that the Igala language is a center of all other languages. They study Igbo, there is Igbo language, there is Hausa, there is Edo, there is in the same Igala.
Within
so
Igala language.
In Igala language. Wow. So it's a very central thing. I am not an expert in language or language development, but the important thing is that these languages must be given the time, the opportunity to survive. And the children should, as early as possible, identify with their mother tongue. My sister, it is wrong for people to come and say, so some people want to teach their children English when they do not understand English themselves. Somebody who was learning in a private school said, hungry is hungry in me. And this is the kind of things you think they are learning English.
And the child is going to pick that because daddy said so.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Please,
now, you said something very, very profound there, that until you can speak your own native language, you may not necessarily be able to speak
others. Yeah.
So there is a strong link. There's a strong link between your understanding thoroughly your own native tongue,
yes,
and speaking other languages.
Yes,
like
because
English.
unfortunately you are into a serious confusion. You will be having a little smatter of those languages that belong to you. You also want to claim you are a master of the other languages. At the end of the day, you have not learned either. So it is necessary and better that you start from your own language, from the definition of those languages. When you know the rudiments, you can acquire more language. Because when we were growing up, we were able to use our own language to compare the new languages we are learning. And in the process, you are learning 2, you are learning 3. And at the end of the day, you become a master, if not all of them. So you can become a professor of French, but you should know that language. If it is an Edo language, don't you listen to with your wife, for instance, when he conveys a beautiful music using Edo language? There are have you not listened to our musicians? And there are these wise sayings from these elders.
Yes, indeed.
Beautiful way, and the way, the tonality, the way these messages are conveyed. My brother and my sister, it is necessary and better to start from this language.
Okay, let's get on. There are other factors that have also led to the death of indigenous languages, and there are the issue of migration, inter-ethnic marriages, exposure to foreign lifestyle and habits due to modernization and spread of urban settlements.
And some have actually linked that to television, that is actually used, media generally. Now, recognizing the vulnerability of indigenous languages, the United Nations has proclaimed 2019 the International Year of Indigenous Languages to draw attention to the critical loss of indigenous languages and the urgent need to preserve, revitalize and promote indigenous languages. Okay, is it a good place to start from, that the United Nations is actually recognizing that there is a need to restore indigenous languages? Why do we even really need our indigenous languages?
Exactly, very important, very important question. Why is language so, why is it important we must speak all our languages?
Well, it is because, as I said earlier, that these other languages convey ideologies and meanings which other languages may not convey. And in that process, there are styles and the processes of delivering these languages that make them superior and better than even the ones we are speaking. But there's something I want to emphasize. Our scholars have fallen off the track because most of the time they want to write in the literature. They produce literature in the language they feel the world will read, like English, for instance. Ngugi Watungo decided to produce the rest of his works in Kiswahili. And then you are compelled to translate this to English because beautiful works had been fully produced in Kiswahili language. Well, you know, Acheb's wonderful work, Things Fall Apart, Arrow of God, and what have been done in English. How we wish he did some of them in Igbo language. It would have helped to sell the Igbo language. But let me just say that the same English we are trying to use, as I told you earlier, have been developed by people who own it.
All right, let's come back to this. Let's come back to this after the break. Let's go on a break, and then we come back to dwell more on the African languages we're discussing here. We have Ferdinand and Ikwe with us, but don't forget that right now we're going out on TVC Entertainment. Viewers there can continue with TVC Breakfast on TVC Nigeria on Concert Channel 190 and DSTV Channel 418.
You can also continue to watch the show on GoTV 45 and ACTV 510. Stay with us.
If you're just joining us, you're watching TVC Breakfast. We're discussing African languages in here. Reports have shown that so many languages have gone extinct in Africa and even parts of the world. And we're talking about this, what can be done to revive languages. 2019 has been set aside by the United Nations to revitalize, to draw attention to International Day for Indigenous Languages, so to draw attention to revitalizing some of these languages. So we've been talking with the Director General, Center for Black and African Art and Civilization, Ferdinand Anikwe, with us in the studio. Now, let's give you more information. Now, English language is regarded as the language for polished people, but there is also the Pidgin English commonly spoken on the streets and marketplaces in parts of Africa.
Yes, indeed. Now, Pidgin English is a mix of English and ethnic Nigerian languages, spinned in an interesting manner. It is estimated that Nigerian Pidgin English is the native language of approximately 3 to 5 million people. Okay, so what do they talk?
How you go be? You know, that kind of. But apart from Nigeria, they speak it in Sierra Leone, in parts of Liberia too. And it's really interesting. Now, English language is used in teaching students in schools, and in fact, many schools frown at the use of indigenous languages during school hours, and it attracts a fine or sanction sometimes.
Now, over the years, government took steps to promote the study of indigenous languages in schools by including them in the education curriculum. Now, the Federal Ministry of Education made it compulsory for every student to study and register at least one Nigerian language at senior school examination. The Nigerian Constitution is not silent on the promotion of indigenous languages. Section 55 of the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria says, the business of the National Assembly shall be conducted in English and in Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba when adequate arrangements have been made.
But the National Assembly has never conducted any business in any indigenous languages so far. But some state legislatures have designated special days to hold their sitting in an indigenous language. The Lagos State House of Assembly, for instance, is a good example of that. The Assembly introduced the use of Yoruba language for deliberation in 2007.
I guess that's a really good one there. Lagos State blazing the trail. Now, the Assembly now conducts its sitting in Yoruba every Thursday. You heard one of the...
In fact, let's play that.
Let's play that
for them to hear
where
how it
she
goes.
Said, Omi Eko, Ekoni.
Omi Eko, Ekoni.
Èmi rò pé omi ẹ̀kọ́ ni. Ọba alágbègbè kirikiri náà ni.
Àsọ̀rọ̀ yàrá ló pa baálẹ̀ bàrà. Tó ń dábàá ti jí láàárọ̀ láìṣẹ́ kùmà la máa ṣe o. Wọ́n dẹ̀ jí náà wọ́n kó kùmà tí.
Olórí ọmọ ẹgbẹ́ tó pọ̀ jùlọ. Nǹkan méjì ló jẹyọ ibi tí wọ́n ti fẹ́ ṣe. Mo rò pé kì í ṣe kirikiri, agbègbè kirikiri.
Kiri yàtọ̀.
They're coming
really
from,
there.
you know, I remember Igi Gogoron Magumi Loju Okere Latin Wo.
Hey.
Maybe you can weigh in on
you have
this
to
one.
break that down.
Give us an Igbo proverb.
Well, there are several Igbo proverbs.
Yes.
One of them is Kaka Hawaii,
So what does that mean?
Means if a woman has a short hand, that is the hand she will use to touch the husband.
Hey, hey. All right.
If it is a long one.
Okay.
So, it's a
through
function of
movies, I used to get this one that said that Ndebanye Sena onye wetaroji weterendo.
Yeah.
Hey, and I couldn't forget that.
He who brings cola
brings life.
It's amazing. How do we allow these things to be lost on us? Talking about proverbs, for example, these are ways that expressions are conveyed that you cannot express in any other way without losing the meaning or the essence.
Like the Igbos say that the proverb is the oil with which you eat language. Now, the issue of, you mentioned something about Pidgin English. I want to convey one message that a lot of times the language of expression shows the class nature of the society. The Pidgin English is for those who were not highly educated to use the actual English. Some of them were engine drivers, some of them were mason carpenters and that. And that was why Fela and Nicola Okuti chose to speak in that language. And that language is the greater in terms of number. You know, when Christ was on earth, he was able to identify with the downtrodden. And so he became the greatest politician that had ever lived. So Fela identified with the common people. And that Pidgin English combines both English, French, and all that you may not understand. So this is a language that was spoken widely by the downtrodden.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's get along. That children are no longer given the opportunity to learn their local dialects as right from birth. They are exposed to programs packaged and produced by foreign media. A good example is the Sesame Street puppet show, which many adults can relate with.
Yes, a few indigenous programs that promoted our indigenous culture and languages are no longer common. An example is Tales by Moonlight. Oh yes, I remember that one. A folklore show for kids. It's been overshadowed by other popular foreign children programs and cartoons.
Wow. Content.
Something in him or her that can make him or her famous and popular. So don't spite anybody. You hear, that's the end of my story. You enjoyed it? Okay, I used to enjoy Moonlight story too in those days. And that's why I'm as young as you are. Yes, thank you for watching. Until next week, when we come your way again.
How can any young Nigerian forget Tales by Moonlight? It's
The
really
stories of
wonderful.
Ijapa
Stories
and all
so
the
on.
rest of them.
All right, let's bring in Foladele in here to give us a perspective of reaction on social media. Foladele, Caro.
Caro.
Yeah,
No,
Caro.
you have to say Caro too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're familiar.
Oh, okay.
And I'm younger, so you say Caro.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Down to Omar Ferdinand.
You've gone to another dimension where you say for
Yes,
the elderly
older people.
or the older people, and you say for the
really?
for your contemporaries.
And you know, some older people actually even use for younger people when they're not really familiar. Like
familiar.
the first time you're meeting the person.
Okay,
So you
Caro,
can't- So but you say for me. So you say Caro. We're cool like that.
Yeah, we're cool. We're pals, you know, right?
Okay, and I think it was very important that you mentioned that English is actually the official language of Nigeria, because that did raise a debate online. People talking about how when they go abroad, people say, "Oh, how come you speak English so well?" When you was there in quotes, and they say, "Well, we speak English in my country. That's our official language." It's very interesting. All right, let's see what some other people are saying online about this one. Omogbola says, English as Nigeria's official language remains one of its biggest problems, saddled all with twisted statements, misconceptions, and ignorance. Biggie of the Sky People says, we thank people like Flavor, Fino, and Zoro, those are artists here in Nigeria, for forcing the Igbo language into popular culture through their music. Bless them.
Yeah, I think Olamide does
Yes,
that.
Olamide.
And Two-Face also does that
Exactly.
for Idoma, which is good.
Yes, which is a language in the States. She says, Nigeria is cool, but visiting the Igbo states is what really hits you. Hearing your language, vibing with your people, it's really amazing. TM says, that Calabar Akwa Ibom language, that's Efek and Ibibio.
Yes.
Got to be the sweetest language in Nigeria. Wish I could speak it.
Oh, yeah.
Sam Efe says, in the UK, schools basically beg you to speak your first language to your kids at home, while in Nigeria, they encourage you not to, by all means. Mazibichis, and this is the last one, he says, if you've lived in Nigeria for 10 years and can't speak any Nigerian language, you're a failure.
Bam.
Bam.
That's it.
Bam.
Bam.
Do you agree? What do you think about
it's a beautiful. Look, people are conducting researches, even more than some professors in the universities. What we've done is a social research. It conveys meaning and all kinds of expression to the people that are watching. Very interesting development.
So do you think that do you agree with the statement, if you've lived in Nigeria for 10 years and can't speak any Nigerian language, you are a failure?
Yes, of course. That's what we are saying. I'm saying that what you've done is a wonderful research. And anybody who does not identify with this should better leave Nigeria.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if you can't...
10 years, failure.
If you can't... Yes, now you failed now. You cannot understand the way we communicate, the way we show what we are, the way we live. Wow. Then you are not one of us. But you better leave Nigeria.
Wow.
Yes.
But who is to blame when children, because sometimes...
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like I'm preempting you. I'm sure you would have wanted to ask that.
The big question.
Yeah, because a lot of times when you're in circles, and
we have
people,
a misplaced value system where everybody wants to grab foreign language. And it does not in any way show education. The language you use, it doesn't mean you are educated because you've learned another language. There are other technical processes which will enable you to graduate from one level to the other. You mustn't be using English language.
No, what I'm saying...
So those guys who, let me tell you, those parents who are now insisting on using the languages which even the parents do not understand is not a proper way of education. That's not... Teaching is the creation of an adequate environment where learning can take place, if it is in the marketplace. So it mustn't be what you are doing, it mustn't be the chalk style. It could be the proper way of talking to a child in a given indigenous language, and the child understands properly. That is education.
So it's the parent's responsibility.
All right, we have less than a minute to end this now, Fola. Thank you so much. Okay, now, this question I'm going to ask you has caused a lot of controversy amongst people. IBO, Igbo, or IGBO, Igbo. What is the real word for the pronunciation for the language in the East?
No, the actual pronunciation is Igbo, IGBO.
So where did IBO come from?
We can forgive those who can't. If they call it Igbo, those things are not necessary.
It doesn't matter.
The important thing is the language. Do you understand it? And you know there are different dialects of the Igbo language. It's not even the matter. Even if it is the Abakaliki one that you understand, go on with it. It's an Igbo language.
Okay.
And they contain things that will interest you. The same thing with the other languages, including Yoruba, Hausa, and the rest.
All right, of course, indigenous institutions, traditional institutions, churches, mosques, parents, everybody does have a role to play. We can't really leave it to government alone. But we have to say thank you.
Most importantly, those in authority, the executive council can hold meetings in the language of
Thank
the
you.
All right, we have to say
the government passed a law that everybody in primary school must pass the Yoruba language before the next one.
Thank you
let
very much.
To stay simulated.
All right, thank you, Ferdinand
Nikwe,
Nikwe, Director General, Center for Black and African Arts and Civilization. Thanks for coming.
It's my pleasure.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. We go on a break and then we come back with another discussion on the program. Stay with us.